For you, I will start. First of all, thank you, UC, and at Festival to invite me and to agree to invite me live here. I insisted on. You asked me for an online talk. I say I don't do this anymore, and the reason is my post-COVID trauma. I think I have with that online. But it's also very much related to my lecture. But before I start my lecture, I have to warn you, I will make some noise. This was Georgia, November 2024. In fight with the government, who was kind of pro-Russian, and the fight with the elections at that moment. But I show it especially because it went all over the world, and I show it because of the music. Some don't call this music, but it plays a very important role in what happened there, and I think it plays still a very important role in, call it a dissensus society, not a consensus society, but a dissensus society, which is quite polarized. And I will start talking about the origin of this polarization. Where does it come from? I think it comes from, but I read it also with other political scientists, philosophers, analysts of nowadays. So a lot of things are maybe even cliches, what I will say now. One is definitely, but it's maybe the most recent one, which polarizes societies nowadays. Why do I say this? Because I was very much involved in war in Ukraine. I was there also during war at the front line. And when I came back from Ukraine to Belgium, I crossed the Belgian border. There was 7th October, Hamas attacked Israel, and there was starting a genocide. And what was for me quite strange at that moment is that not Ukraine, but the fights in Palestine completely polarized our society. Much more than discussions about Russia, etc. My university split in pro-against. My rector was completely confused of what happened, but also there were heavy fights and discussions in cultural houses, in theaters. When the full-scale war started in Ukraine, all the theaters in Belgium, and I'm very much connected with Toneelhuis in Antwerp, my city, they all hang the Ukraine flag. When this happened, we never saw a Palestinian flag. And they refused, even in Toneelhuis, to hang it. But they had heavy discussions about it. So there is this one origin of polarization, but it's a quite recent one, I think. Another one has to do with hyper-competition. It's a system in which we are in. We have to compete with each other constantly. Let's call it neoliberalism, what you want. But it makes us also thinking more in black and white. We have to choose for this or that one, and we have to fight for our own position. Another one is more and more an attention-driven, but also an affect-driven media regime. That means attention-driven means media, especially now with war, you see it, media need to shock to get attention. Otherwise you scroll away. So attention becomes more and more important, but short notice attention. And it tries to shock literally, but by doing, also politicians do that by doing shocking statements. Or to show sensational pictures, so like this one, or shocking images. Also that led us more thinking in black and white. Another thing, it's very much related, of course, if you want to have attention and keep attention in the media, you have to do, as a politician, again and again and again, provocative statements. And what is interesting, and I think this is a shift, because we know this already a long time maybe, but what is interesting, at least in my country, in Belgium, but we all know it from Trump or Orban, is we come from a time which was quite nice, democratic, and was consensus-based. But when there was certainly a lot of provocation during the election campaigns, but once a politician was elected, he or she became a statesman or statesperson. That means, or he became or she became a mayor. That means you are responsible for all the people. And you took this position. This is completely shifted. My mayor in my town, who's now the Prime Minister of Belgium, he still stays, like I call it, spitting on certain citizens of his own town. And he stays provoking them, even when he is responsible for all. And that's the shift. That's what Trump is doing constantly, even when he is the president for all the Americans. At the same time, he is really bashing certain groups in society. That's a very interesting, for me, shift in politics, and that makes us also very polarized. So they stay also in this position, polarizing, as if they are still in the election campaign. And that's a very important, I think, a shift we see in society. A last one is maybe the most important one. And it's very much inspired by Marshall McLuhan, the idea of the medium is the message. If you look at digitalization and how it functions as a medium, it reasons with zeros and ones. It's very binary. Facebook in the past, you could say good or wrong. That was the response. No, you can only say good, I think. But anyway, it's thinking. But this kind of algorithms, which are binary coded, they steer also only to black or white. And this affects, I think, I know this is speculative, but this affects very much our way of reasoning, our brains, how we respond to things, etc. So it's literally how the media intervenes in the message, let's say it like, intervenes in the message. Another thing, what happens with, I think it's certainly COVID-19 was a catalyst of this. It's one of the reasons also why I wanted to be here physically, is that we get more and more sensory deprived. I say it good in English, I don't know. This could be my son. He's now 20 years old, but it could be when he was 14, 15 years old, when COVID was going on. He does this almost 6 to 8, 10, 12 hours a day, sitting at his computer. And what for me is interesting is this focus, of course, but also that the only senses he uses is audio and looking. And so so you see kind of, we are more and more socialized in a kind of sensory deprivation. That means we stimulate very much, we use very much two senses, audio, visual, but that's it. When you Google this, sensory deprivation, you get pictures like this. It's related to torture. They use sensory deprivation to torture people. United States is very good in that. And it's very interesting. Sensory deprivation is also used to get in, when you do yoga or whatever, to get in a good mental state. So focusing on one sound, for example, and so it can give you rest. But at the same time, when you do this for a long time, you get completely disorientated, depressive, etc. So we do this to ourselves. And we are, certainly during COVID, we were forced by our universities, institutions, or employer to do this kind of self-torturing of our system. So it leads to affective deprivation. And now I come to a main notion. I come back and back in my lecture is those two, deprivation of affects and sensory deprivation, is what I call aesthetic deprivation. And aesthetic deprivation means, with aesthetics I mean the old notion of aesthesis, so where all your senses are connected with your bodily experiences, with your affects. And I use not emotions, affects, because affects is much more unconsciously. And I think this is very much going on. I'm talking about theater and art. I think artists and theater, but all artists in general, have to play a very important role in this aesthetics. Artists are the managers of aesthetics. They are the boss of aesthetics. So they can intervene here. Because I think this is a very dangerous generation, evolution also. Because when my son, I have to not anymore because he's somewhere in a room studying, I hope. But 2 years ago, when I have to ask him at 6 o'clock to come for dinner, we have to shout a lot because of our headset, etc., that he comes. But even then, there were two attitudes he had. Or he said completely nothing at the table, he ate quickly and went away, or he was very aggressive. All the boxes in the cellar where he is gaming were crashed, because he was also very aggressive when he loses the game. So it affects us enormously, those games, but also I think especially this is sensory deprivation. It has an effect on our emotions, and again, it has an effect, I think, or it stimulates, or it works as a catalyst of polarization. Yeah. So this is, let's call it on the media level, and then on the political level, we see going on something very interesting. I think the last, let's call it 20, 30 years, nowadays the notion of illiberal regimes is very well known. When we talk about Trump, when we talk about Orban, is destroying in a way what we called before the liberal democracy. But repressive liberalism is, for me, in my opinion, I think I wrote a book, Repressive Liberalism, 15 years ago, is the pre-stage of the illiberal regime. And what is it about? It is what we call nowadays as a general term or a generic term, neoliberalism. But neoliberalism is absolutely not what it means. It is not new freedom. It is the opposite. It is the repression of liberty. And that's why I call it, inspired by Herbert Marcuse, repressive liberalism. What does this do? Liberalism says, also the old-fashioned liberals say, take as an individual your own responsibility. Make your own career. Become all, more and more in our society, not a contracted employer with a fixed job, but a freelancer. Become also as artists, be independent. You need to be independent. It's a moral obligation to be independent, to care for yourself. It's what is called expressive individualism. We need to be that. You need to become also freelancer. Somebody an idea where the word comes from? Freelancers were the knights which were hired for the best bid. They had a freelance. So, and when you have a freelance, you better don't have an opinion of the one who pays you. You're better not in a union. And so this is stimulated enormously. Governments are stimulated this. Liberal, neoliberal governments, also, by the way, the liberal democracies were stimulating this the last 15 years. And this brought me to something that is for me very interesting, and it was this book of Herbert Marcuse. It's The One-Dimensional Man. I read it when I was 19 years old. I didn't understand a clue of what he was saying. It was really, I did not, especially this phrase. Under the rule of a repressive whole, liberty can be made into a powerful instrument of domination. See the very strange contradiction. It's one of the reasons why I don't believe anymore in liberal democracy. It did something very strange with us. It stimulated very much our individual freedom, but not our collective freedom. And that's quite problematic. So if you stimulate this individual freedom only on the individual level, you give people all things in their hands, all become freelancers. You are the most weakest person on earth because you are not anymore connected, structurally embedded in social organizations. That is what was Marcuse was 1961, I think, pointing at that moment. And I think, so this was the pre-existence of what we see nowadays. We see coming up a lot of authoritarian regimes. Also in Belgium, they're busy now, finally, to go in that direction. And it is based literally on this. They are good friends. My Prime Minister Bart de Wever is a good friend of VOCA, which is the organization for private companies, etc., the captains of industry, etc. So it's very interesting how there is a relation between this neoliberalism and illiberal regimes. And this is, of course, also very much stimulating polarization. It's also interesting what the mechanism is, and then I stop with this term. At one side they say, be independent, become an independent entrepreneur, whatever, become a freelancer. But at the same time and we control. More bureaucracy. Look at Europe. After I did a Creative Europe project or a Horizon project, it's enormous bureaucracy. I had to do time writing and this kind of stuff. It's very strange when you think creatively and you have to do time writing. But anyway, this kind of, so you say, yes, organize yourself, take your freedom, be a liberal, a good liberal democrat, but at the same time, more and more control. And already control beforehand. And this is the kind of very strange tension in which we are. I can tell anecdotes about that. One. It was when I started, I work in Belgium now, but I worked for 10 years in the Netherlands. And it was a job at an art school where I was kind of research professor. It was a new job, find it out to do PhDs in the arts, to supervise them. And I get a very beautiful office with 2 plans and beautiful design light, and a very big one also. And after the month was going on, I get the bill. So much for each square meter you have to pay, not from my own fee, but from the working budget. So it had to, then I went to my director, what is this? I said, okay, then I go to the apartment, the opposite of the school is much more cheaper than what I have to pay. Ah, no, we have a 10-year contract with a company. That's literally repressive liberalism. You're free, it's contract-based, it's liberal, but at the same time, you're forced to do the contract with this kind of company. And that's the very strange mixture in it. Anyway, going back to consensus, talking about democracy, etc. When we talk about democracy nowadays, when I ask my students, what comes in your mind when you hear the word democracy? Somebody? Most of them say this: parliament, voting, elections. This is indeed a kind of democracy. This is a well-known democracy. By the way, they still have it in Russia also, this kind of parliament, etc. It's studied by Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America, but it's a specific kind. It's in fact representative democracy. It's a democracy where you vote, indeed, and it is what I call, it follows a kind of calculating rationality. In a good representative democracy, the majority has the power. Who win the elections has the most votes, and they are in power. So that's the classical or basic role of representative democracy. But in the 70s, there was a lot of controversy against that, and May 68 was maybe the culmination point. They said this functions not quite well, and we invented, very much inspired by this guy's Jürgen Habermas, another kind of democracy, and that's the consensus democracy or the deliberative democracy. So people don't only vote, but they sit around the table, citizens, to discuss stuff. Or we organize the unions who have a structural agreement to talk with private companies and the government, and they make a kind of regulation in this. So this is deliberative democracy. So it's a democracy in which the voice still counts, but not in voting, but in what the voice says. Yeah, so giving a good argument, discussion, dialogue is very important in it. So it's not only quantitative of calculating rationality, it's argued rationality. Who has the best arguments wins. There was also the convention of Jürgen Habermas. As long as we give free play to well-articulated arguments and you go in dialogue, you get there. And those people, this is in Antwerp, the city where I live in, the burger account. It's a civil account. It's very interesting. It's a fantastic system, I think. The city of Antwerp decided 10 years ago that 10% of the budget goes to the people. You can decide. So you need to agree. They come there, they have proposals. Some want a cycling path, other wants a football game, other wants a school, can be a lot of, other wants to make an experimental film, can be also. But you have to discuss there with others, what is the best plan? And at the end you vote. So what is going on there? It was 1.4 million euros for Antwerp. It's fantastic. I had to discuss there, I was defending an experimental film of a friend of mine, and I had to discussed there with a traditional Jewish person about cooking for children. So it's the first time I talked with him. First time in my life. I cycle every day when I go to work through their neighborhood in Antwerp, but I never talked with him. That was the first time, so it's fantastic. So it's an invention and it's a correction of this democracy. It is negotiation, but who comes there? People who can talk, who have the time to come to talk there. So it's also very much a middle class democracy. And more people felt this, and certainly the last 10 years, and responded to that. I think it started definitely with the financial crisis, 2007, 2008. People who occupy Wall Street, etc. People were not satisfied anymore. People went often very aggressive on the streets. It comes back also with Black Lives Matters, whatever. So you get another kind of democracy, and it is described beautifully by Chantal Mouffe. She's a Belgian philosopher. The book is called Agonistics. It's an agonistic democracy. It's something else, and this goes more in the direction Jussi was pointing at, I think, or willing to go to. I don't know if I want to go to that, but anyway, so it means it's much more. People come on the streets, sometimes very aggressive, break things, etc. And politicians often say, yeah, what is this about? This is what's often called senseless violence. They cannot make sense of it. But they do this exactly because everything what they said there was not understood, because they didn't have the correct language. They didn't speak the language at all, maybe. They had not the diploma, so they were not schooled enough to have the right words. So they do it in another way. And that's why you sometimes have this outbursting violence on the streets. Also the anti-vaxxers during COVID, by the way. Too much regulations they don't understood, but also the majority said at that moment, we don't understand why those anti-vaxxers, they're really crazy what they are doing on the street. So this kind of agonistic democracy is the last 10 years. But agony is very much playing with affects. So it comes maybe from a progressive, suppressed social groups, but it comes also from Donald Trump. It's the same politics. It plays with emotions. It doesn't give facts. It doesn't argue with facts anymore. It performs, like Richard Sennett describes in The Performer, by the way. He compares Trump very much with a theater performer, like that. And it is playing with facts, but and that's a very important point of Chantal Mouffe, I think, it respects dissensus. And dissensus means the opposite of consensus. It says two things. One, it doesn't say you don't need a consensus. At a certain moment, you need to have a consensus to act, but be aware, as Jussi already said, consensus is only consensus for a certain group, which is most of the time in power. We are now still living, for the moment, it don't take long anymore, we very much live in a middle class consensus. And this is over. Trump says it is over, but also a lot of refugees, immigrants, other people say this is over. And we are very much sandwiched, the middle class, the middle class, between those two kinds of democracies, in fact. And I think more and more this kind of democracy is disappearing. Even my socialist Minister of Culture in Belgium decided, I think 3 months ago, that a Museum of Contemporary Art almost the only Flemish, at least, the only Flemish museum of contemporary art cannot be anymore a museum for contemporary art. One decided, no negotiation, also no museum plan. Socialists, social democratic minister decided, no negotiation. This is really destroying this kind of model. And I think more and more, especially far right, but also conservative parties, want to explicitly deconstruct this model we had. So this automatically become when we have no power at this point. And this is happening, I think, at this moment. I go very quick to this slide. I'm talking too long, I feel it already, but anyway. This is very much related historically, but also to arts. When we talk about representative democracy, it's typical 19th century bourgeois culture where it started from. It's related to the nation state, the building of the nation state. It's very much stimulating individualism, and it's talking about high culture, vertical culture. Bourgeois culture is the culture, the only good culture. It's analyzed beautiful by the sociologist Pierre Bourdieu in the 70s already. Deliberative democracy is very much, I said already, related to the middle class. It is respecting other cultures, multiculturalism, etc. But in fact, it's another sociologist, Ulrich Beck, pointed at this kind of multiculturalism is still there in a representative way. We make, for example, exhibitions with enough black people in the exhibition, balanced gender exhibitions, etc. But it is often not in how we organize things. When you look at the jury or the staff of a museum in Belgium or theater, most are white people and often still male. 80% of the artists in the collection of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Antwerp, male. So this is still going on. So in the structure, so we do, let's say it in the facade or in the front stage, we represent the other, but not in the structures. That's the problem with this kind of deliberative democracy. And response is that agonistic democracy, which takes, so deliberative democracy, at least discursively talks about horizontal aesthetics. Agonistic democracy talks about, and I come later to that, aesthetics as aesthesis. And I mean literally, again, where all the senses is involved. It is trying to stimulate collectivism. It is stimulating a kind of expression of subaltern cultures. Maybe the last Documenta 15 you saw, in a way, a representation of this kind of agonistic aesthetics. Question is, this is the situation. Indeed, I think consensus is over, at least as a political model. And the question is then, what can we do as theater? And I think we can do a lot, and I use some, sorry for that, for my chauvinism, I use some Belgian theater groups who do other things just because I worked with them and I know what they do. That's so I felt safe to talk about them. This is Marta Tentative, is at Antwerp based theater company, and they made a piece about a poor neighborhood in the city. I go very quickly now, and they ask 100 people to sit on the stage and to tell their stories. And this is an actress who tells the stories, but while they are sitting there. So she's quoting one of the people who she is talking with them. So what they do here is, and I think it's a very interesting aesthetic strategy, is what I call, but it comes not from me, I lost her name, comes later, Young, is it's political scientist, feminist scientist, who talks about the erotic gaze. And what she means by that is not sex, but she means by that it's the gaze which makes you curious, so that you are open for new things. This theater does this literally by they are curious to those people, to those stories, they take them seriously, but they give them also the seriousness on the stage to talk about this. So curiousness is very important. Looking for the unexpected. Erotic gaze is also, for example, when you go for the first time to for a new city for a city trip, you're very curious what is around the corner. So this is the erotic gaze. But what is important is that theater stimulates this, and it's against the other gaze, the xenophobic gaze, that you are afraid of everything what is new and what is other. So this is something I think a lot of theater makers try to do this, and what is important, what they do, especially what this company did, is not anymore playing and also not anymore acting with the white middle class, but going into the street, asking people to come on the stage, but also going themselves to work there in the streets. Other strategy, these are architects, is recetas urbanas, means receipts for or menus for the city in Spanish. They built this construction. It is literally trying to desensing, and I mean to make you experience the city in a different way, sense it in another way, or your society in which you are living. They do this in civil space. I don't go into that. I focus on this. And they do it often in spaces like this. This is between the leaf of a tree and the roots of a tree. And the sculpture, what you see, is in fact a shelter for the homeless. And they build it there exactly because they analyzed the law, and they found in the law that there is not one regulation what says what you can do between the leaves of the tree and the roots of a tree. So the police can look at it, but they can do nothing. So it is looking to these gaps between what I call creativity and criminality. Afterwards, it became, 5 years later, criminalized. They founded a regulation, of course, but this looking at the gaps is very interesting. And artists, they also work with a lot of artists, but also with lawyers, by the way. Artists are very interested or very good in finding those gaps in the law and to make the space, because they are creative, etc. This is a very Robin Hood story, but we have also in Belgium, for example, in my own city, Antwerp, this last 3-4 years going on, they call it tegelwippel. So the pavement, people put the pavement out of the street to a street mostly where you can walk to let the green out. Some governments say you cannot do that, you get a fine. Others say, okay, we tolerate. So it's literally between creativity and criminality. And this is, I think, a very interesting space to operate nowadays. But I think a more interesting space, not a more interesting space, but a more obvious space, is the space where we are used to as theater makers to work in. And it is what I call quasi-public spaces. There are spaces between the private and the public, between the open and the closed. You could say this is a quasi-public space. Not everybody can come in, but in fact, everybody can come in. It depends. There are certain social codes, etc. So it's between open and closed. So it's not a public space. It's not a square. It's, again, a semi-public space. It's also not a safe space. A safe space means that you come together with people in which you most of the time agree, or you had the same experience, a shocking experience, traumatic experience. So you know already before you go in a safe space, I feel safe there because we will understand each other in a way, because we have the same experience. That's not a quasi-subject space. You can go to the theater as a quasi-subject space because you are interested in a theater piece, but you can sit next to somebody of far right, another religion. Certainly in the Belgian opera nowadays, you sit easily next to very conservative, far-right people. Me as a left wing, I don't know the political position, but that makes a quasi-public space possible. That you sit next to somebody, you maybe hate, you never want to see him or her again after the show, but you are forced physically to sit together there, and you trust even each other at that moment because you have the same interest. That's what theater is doing. But also what the course is doing, I think, what film can do, etc. So it brings people physically near, and it is about sharing affects in it. And so it makes that you can find trust. It's the book, what I've written about that. Trust with strangers, that's important. People you don't know, and you maybe don't want to know afterwards, but at that moment there is a certain of such. That's building a society of dissensus, literally, that you learn to live next to each other without killing each other, but also learning to disagree with each other. And that is what is called kind of urban intimacy. And I now want to point at a very important political dimension and political importance of that. It makes possible, when you have such spaces enough, it gives people the courage afterwards to go collectively on the street, for example, to protest or to claim things or to negotiate with politicians or people in power, because they dare to do it collectively, because they had this kind of physical experience of trust with each other and sharing the same interest. So that was when the Belgian Revolution started. They came out of the opera, the Monet in Brussels. Some said that in La Monnaie, the Porte-Cie, what was played there was said something, but a lot of historians said there was said nothing that stimulates the people to go out. The only thing what happens is they sit together there. And they looked at the play, and they trusted each other, and they trusted each other so much that they dared to go public, go on the street afterwards. So it are certain kind of waiting rooms to dare to go public. Then the sensing aesthetics. I come more and more to theater. I think we can follow three strategies to make this sensing of this senses possible as another mode than consensus. The first one is what aesthetics means is beautiful thinking. It's Baumgarten, but it means literally also in the way as Jacques Rancière used it, is trying to represent other communities. I mentioned already, I will put a picture again, the 100 citizens of this street in Antwerp, sitting on the stage, looking to the public and telling the stories. It's still with a distant gaze. It's a beautiful piece, a beautiful picture also to look at it. But it starts from people who are not represented. They try to represent it. It can be also representing other voices, subaltern cultures. It can be also representing other aesthetics, other color combinations, other designs. So it doesn't need to be heavy politically or something like that, but it is about representing what was not yet represented yet. Another strategy is what I call the ugly word, because I didn't find another one, situational in situ art. That means artists go in a place, part of the city, and they literally sense the nearness of people, of conflicts there. Can be ecological problems, can be social problems, etc. So they go into the street. other piece is called the Zeehoek series of Toneelhuis made it. It's playing football in the street. Last one, and that's still one slide, sorry for that. Depth aesthetics, it's a difficult one, but I like it very much. It is trying to make connection with our ancestors. It's trying to share or find the weaknesses in the society. It's a beautiful podcast made by a theater maker in Antwerp about the repressive past collaboration during the Second World War. It comes in whole, you look with the podcast, you literally listen to the soul of Antwerp and all the hidden and especially suppressed histories. And that is this kind of aesthetics too. But it starts for me from very universal shared fragilities and the knowledge or the fact that we know once we are going to die. But it is also trying to make the connections. I see this a lot in Ukraine. This kind of, and that's why I think theater is doing something there. But last statement, I think, and I come back to one of my favorite philosophers, George Agamben. He says, a political community is built on a sensory foundation. And I come back to my aesthetic statement. So I think literally communities are constructed not only by rational arguments, consensus theory, they are literally connected also by affects, the sensations they have. But I think Agamben, doesn't go far enough. I don't think it is only the sensory, it is literally, again, the aesthetics. And I mean by aesthetics, how the senses, all the senses, so not only the audiovisual, are connected, are brought in connection with what you feel, your affects, and your way of reasoning. And I end with this film. I go back to Georgia 15 years ago. It's a very, I think, 1 minute film made by a friend of mine, Jan Beddergenoot. And I hope you understand immediately why the music is so important.
ხედავ ათასობით ადამიანს, რომ დაიწყეს მოძრაობები. და მე ჩავარდი საშტო პანიკაში, რომ აგებია მოხდა. ის გამოვაკა, რაც კი შეიძლება მოხდეს, ტრაგედია რაცა, რომ საკუთარ ხოდა რომ ადამიანებს რა ეცეკვდათ და მე ვხვდები, რომ ფეხებს ვაყარებ ამ მუსიკაზე. ეს გამოგაცა ისხარია, ხდება. ფულს მივხვდი
So you can dance also. Democracy. Thank you. All right, questions? Okay, sorry.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
Pascal. We're supposed to have a Q&A, but we need